Pleasant good evening to you. I want to welcome you to another Wednesday evening edition of Facing the Heart Truth. Remember, Facing the Heart Truth is a ministry of the Fresh Start Community Outreach. And at Fresh Start, we believe in empowering people in communities. And so these programs that we do every Wednesday evening is designed to inform, it is designed to educate, it is designed to empower. We are in our series Pandemic Talk because we are talking about how we as a people can navigate in this pandemic, how we as a people can not only be healthy physically, but also work on our mental health as well. And so tonight with me and joining me tonight is Mr. Wills Campbell. You'll see him come on in a moment, as well as Miss Carol Lord. You know that Will is a regular feature on Facing the Heart Truth. And so we are going to be dwelling in his wheelhouse tonight. We are going to be dwelling in his space, um, where he is expert. Um, and so it is a joy to have you with us again, Will. And then we have the beautiful young lady uh, who's joining us tonight. It's so important to have beauty join us turns from time to time, reminds us of a softer side. um, when we get on these programs, we get going. And so when you have a female on the program, it means that we've got to um to make some adjustments. I'm just kidding. Kara is a woman of substance. She is a woman of purpose. She is. I can give you her qualification, but I'll just leave it at this. She is a psychologist. She is teaching psychology at the University of Guyana. So we wanted to have her with us tonight as we engage in this amazing conversation about the importance of mental health. And so, before I ask them to say something, let's just take a moment to pray. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook, on YouTube, I want to encourage you to share the live tonight. Share the link, tag somebody you know who may be struggling with a mental health issue. Tag them. This is the program for them to be locked on to tonight. Let it pass up on them little series and the KFC thing on the radio and all them stuff. And let them tune in here tonight because we're about to say some things to them and to you that will help people who are really, really struggling mentally and with their mental health. So let's take a moment to pray. Father, tonight we thank you that we can gather together in this space. We know, Lord God, that you will speak to our life. Your word reminds us that when we gather together in your name, you are there in the midst. And so this is not just another gap. This is a moment, Lord God, for a life to be touched. This is a moment, Lord God, for light to shine in the midst of darkness. This is a moment, Lord God, where you will speak, Lord Jesus, and bring about transformation. Direct somebody to a source. Direct somebody, Lord God, through this time and through this ministry as we gather tonight, Lord God. We ask that you will speak and deliverance and healing and breakthrough will come. We pray tonight that you will just have your own way amongst us and in us and through us. In Jesus' name, amen. 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 I didn't intend to pray too long because I want to get straight into the conversation. And since we're having Kara, who is with us for the first time, I'm going to ask Kara to tell us a little bit about herself before we get down into the meat of the program.
Sure. Thank you so much, the Right Reverend Dr. Neilford Chase. Thank you so much for having me, and good evening to my colleagues. Good evening to everyone who is watching right now. And I just want to put it out there in the atmosphere as well as Reverend Doctor did, just to say, I trust that other people will join us as well, because I believe that this is certainly a forum where we're able to reach people and help people in our own little ways by contributing to their lives and talking about some of the issues that we know affect them. My name is Cara Lord. I am a psychologist and an educator. I wear some other hats, but I'll just quickly say to you that I am employed at the University of Guyana. So I teach in the Faculty of Education and Humanities. I teach in the area of psychology. And I also teach uh, particularly like working with students who are educators. So, although I'm an educator, I work with other students who are educators as well. Will is in that faculty with me also. My area of expertise in psychology, and for those who've been following with some of the things that Mr. Campbell has shared and other psychologists in the country, we each have our own different specializations. So Will, in particular, is a therapist, and he deals particularly in the areas of counseling, clinical psychology. My area of specialization is occupational psychology. So that ties in work and different aspects of work functions and how work affects us in our daily lives. It is a big part of what we do. We each have our own different roles and functions, and so I look at how psychological principles are applied to the workplace. I try to help people in and through workplace. So I do some consultancy work as well with organizations to help develop their human resources and their personnel capacity, and to develop those organizations in terms of their structures and those kinds of things. So there are a lot of things that I can say, as you mentioned, that you could probably as well. But I think that that's a good summary and a good place to stop for now, except to say thanks for having me on the show, particularly usually when we have sessions through one of the organizations that myself and Mr. Campbell are a part of, which is the Guyana Association for Professional Psychologists. We usually have Will on the program, and will usually be the thorn amongst the roses. So it is quite interesting for me to be on this program, because then I get to be kind of in Will's shoe, where we usually have our women on the panel, and then we're happy to have a male psychologist there amongst us, give us that perspective. So I was very happy when I got the invite and they said, "Oh, we're going to talk about some issues, and particularly I'm talking about issues that deal with men's mental health, not just generally the importance of mental health." I thought, yeah, okay, a female is invited to this, and so I'm happy to be a part of the discourse. Thanks.
Yes, yes, it is so important to have you as part of this team. In the background while we were preparing, I said to one of our producers, I've said, here's the challenge. We've been on this program for more than 5 months, I believe. And one of the things that we've not done, we've not had a lot of females come on the program, because the intent was just to, intent originally was to speak to men. But as we grew, we recognized that we're not just only speaking to men, we're speaking to a cross section of people. So thank you for joining us tonight and making us, um, with all these gray beard and bald head, look beautiful next to you. Mr. Campbell is with us, and so I'm going to ask him to say a few words before we get down to business. The rose who used to be among the thorns, now he is the thorn and carries the rose.
Good evening, Reverend Dr. Chase. Good evening, my colleague Cara. It's always a pleasure to see you. Um, we kind of we're always in the same virtual rooms. But we don't get to see each other, and even though we work in this at the same place, and it's really a pleasure to see you, Cara. Good evening to all our viewers. Um, I look forward to a really engaging discussion, and as usual, I can assure you that we all are going to learn this evening. And so I don't want to hold this up anymore. I don't want to hold this up much longer. I'm just going to give way to the discussion. I'm going to step aside so that we can get this ball rolling.
Excellent. So let's get going. We are in the ring, the real ring, dealing with real issues, not political issues. Uh, and so let's begin. Let's begin. Let's begin. And I want to um, open just by giving you a prelude to some of the things that we've been seeing in society, and then to ask your opinion on how do we begin to address the mental health challenges that people are facing in our society. Recently, there was a video on Facebook of a young woman somewhere on the West Demrara area that was literally just walking in the very middle of the road. And there were some people who were laughing, some people who were making fun of it. But then there were those who were saying, listen, this is a serious issue. We can't have a young lady just walking in the middle of the road and we're not taking it seriously. There has to be something that is going on with her that she did not express publicly. And then we also had, I think it was a week ago, a young lady who, after being terminated, Cara would know that word. We use the word term at a certain company. After being terminated of her services, we are told she committed suicide. And then I saw another post on Facebook where another male was talking about he was about to end his life. He's fed up with living, and he was about to. And the person who was reaching out to him was saying, "Man, no, don't do that to me. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk." And it came about where the person says, "Get your funeral clothes. It's done." And so we are seeing these mental health challenges. We don't have, I don't have the suicide numbers in Guyana. It seems like these are not numbers that we really keep. But we know that suicide is a problem in this nation, and lots of people are dealing with suicide as an outlet, as a result of their mental health challenges. We're also dealing with a lot of people who are depressed. Depression is a big issue that is swept under the carpet because we simply say to a person, "Come on, pull yourself together, cheer up, man. You're gonna make it." And we don't understand the depth of what a person may be going through. This pandemic, in this last year and a half, almost 2 years now, really restricted some of the social outlets that people had, and that allowed them to cope with the various stresses of life. The restrictions on social activities have affected people. Lots of people are spending more time at home than they used to. And that in itself is a stressful situation for both male and female. Um, a man, I think it was in Letem, I believe, who killed his wife, choked her to death. We read of the guy in Bartica who lured the mother of his children to the airport, and then he just went on a rampage. My question to for each of you tonight is, when it comes to this issue of mental health, first and foremost, what must we do to shine a light on how serious this issue is? And I am not picking who will go first. But since Cara is here for the
I don't
first
know what the precedence is. So I
since Cara is
hesitated
here,
for a second, but then
since
I
Cara is
noticed.
here for the first time, I'm gonna give her the first jump at this point.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. You have raised so many different things there, and I don't necessarily want to call them issues per se, but they're definitely instances. They're real life lived experiences and scenarios, many of which I have not heard of. Not to seem too out of touch, but I don't always get to follow what's happening every day. I
Yes, you're
am
only speaking
some
to men.
things personally in terms of development, and so it's sometimes very difficult for me to catch up on my readings outside of that and to see what's happening on social media and those kinds of things. So many of those instances that you shared were new and things that I had not heard before. But I jotted down a couple of things that I wanted to say in response to it. And in response to the general question that you framed to us in terms of what are some of the things that we need to do to make sure that we're getting the message across that mental health is important, it's serious, it's definitely to be taken seriously. So I won't speak to every issue point by point, but just some general things about. First off, we talked about a young lady walking in the middle of the road. This is the bit that you shared with me is the only bit I've heard about the case. So I won't presume to know what's happening or to make any kind of suggestions that will lead us to identify a case or a situation or a problem or anything like that. But what I want to say to the general public and those who are watching is that instances where we see people are behaving what we know to be out of the ordinary, or what we call in psychology abnormal, against the norm, those are all things that we need to be aware of and to take seriously. It's not difficult to spot when somebody's behaving outside of the norm. And what we tend to do is we tend first thing, just by instinct, I guess, pull out a phone or a device and start to record that and make our commentary on those kinds of things. And often than not, those kinds of reactions that we have are not usually helpful. Not saying that it's not something that you might want to record, not saying that you're not going to get a lot of views on that, not saying that other people are not going to want to see what's here. But really and truly, when it comes down to it, it's not just a mental health issue. The issue that you raised is a personal safety issue. It's a public safety issue. It's about making sure that that person is out, that they're not doing harm to themselves and that they won't do harm to others as well. And those are some fundamental things that we don't realize, that mental health is also tied to personal health, to the more traditional senses of health that we see and that we're aware of and that we pay attention to and that we give a lot of light to and we take as a very big priority. So we tend to see it with, and I know we say it a lot of stigma that's attached to it. We tend to make judgments about people, about what they may be going through, what they may be dealing with, the conclusions. We may categorize them and say, oh, they got this kind of problems, and those are the things that they're dealing with. And that kind of narrative, as I said, is not usually helpful. What's helpful is, for example, in a case where you talked about online, somebody was reaching out and indicating that they had these desires, these thoughts and feelings about ending his or her life. I think you pointed out it was a male figure. Then having somebody who reaches back and says, I'm here for you. Let's talk. What can we do? Should we meet? How can I be helpful to you? Sometimes it's possible because somebody who is thinking about ending their life is not always looking for the help and support that you want to provide. But I tend to find that when there is some kind of indication of it, when they're bold enough to say, this is something I'm thinking about, or say their goodbyes, or leaving lines that we're aware of, that to these farewell sympathies and connotations, then that is somebody who can be helped. That is somebody who is signaling and indicating that they want help. And the right thing to do is not necessarily to blow that up and make that a whole situation, but to see behind the scenes what help can be rendered privately, discreetly, and targeting some of the things that person is dealing with that causes them to feel helpless, or like they don't want to be a part of society anymore, like they don't belong, like they're not interested in anything that they used to be interested in. Sometimes I find tends to happen is that we tend to deal with very traumatic things, and sometimes it's a one-off big trauma, and sometimes it is a prolonged, extended period of chronic trauma, things that are happening to us even from our childhood or even into adolescence, and things that continue to affect us, they're not dealt with. And so some things are a little bit deep rooted, more rooted than others. And I'm saying that to say that when you reach out to somebody, you can't expect that they're just automatically, you're just going to have one conversation with them and they're going to be perfect and everything is going to be all right. I also can't expect that conversation, even a series of conversations, is what they're going to need to help them in that scenario. And I'm going to let Will jump in because I know there are things he wants to say, but there are two other quick things that I want to say. One, I was part of a really good session that was held recently during this month, the month of October, talking about pregnancy and infant loss. It's something that we're making, we're doing a lot of awareness on during this month. And one of the things I wanted to be very, very clear and declarative about is looking at how these issues that we don't traditionally necessarily see tied to tying in men or tying in mental health. These are basic life issues, not that they're trivial life issues, but they're life issues that we all deal with our own way. And one of the things I want to make sure that I stressed in that session that we had, even though I would say 90% of the population they attended were female, I wanted to ensure that the women who were there knew and started to think about, if they hadn't before, the fact that men all deal with trauma, stress, anxiety, loss, depression, hurt, pain, grief that comes with losing a child, even though they did physically care that child, that was their child, and they still suffered loss. And I'm mentioning that here because that is a part of something that we tend to ignore. When we think about mental health, we think about resiliency and who needs to be stronger than whom, and who we can turn to and who we can depend on. And we tend to trivialize men's issues and not think about them as issues at all. And probably that went into a different question that you might have had in future, but those are some of the things that I jotted down that I wanted to say in response to your question, and I'll allow Will to jump in.
Excellent. I'm definitely coming back to the trivializing of the men issues. I'm coming back to that. That is not going to just be said, and I am not going to pick up on it. I'm going to pick up on it, so you don't have to worry. I'm coming back to it in later on. We are going to deal with that. But Mr. Campbell, Cara spoke about um, the safety issue, the helplessness that a person may be feeling, the chronic trauma that they may be going through, as well as the trivializing of the issue. Because a lot of times we think, man, you always with your stupidness, why you don't fix it, and we dismiss a person. We tend to think that one chat, I'm praying for you. I'm a Christian, so I gotta go there. In a chat, I'm praying for you solves the problem. Um, we tend to think, hey man, I use a big man. Oh, what you guys now with them stripping this for? It solves the problem. But in reality, it only pushes the person further and further and further away from us and the realities that they're dealing with, and the sense of helplessness and hopelessness grows. How do we begin to say to people when a person is reaching out to you about an issue that they're struggling with mentally? It is not something for you to dismiss. What do we say to people to get them to recognize how important it is not to dismiss a person who said something like, I think I could make it tomorrow, and just leave it as, but tomorrow's a new day. You're gonna wake up and you're gonna feel better. How do we help people
Right.
to actually see the importance of addressing, even if not professionally, but see the importance of not dismissing a statement like that? Because I know we're not asking that everybody become psychologists and therapists and walk around the place diagnosing mental health problem. That's not where we're at. But how do we do that?
All right. So let me start. Let me start there. Um, I don't know if you noticed, but Cara did not try to diagnose the problem of the woman who was walking down the middle of the street. And Cara is a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we have a lot of people who are not psychologists who are already sure what her issue is. The thing is, in psychology, we know that unless you do a formal assessment, you've interviewed the person and you've done a formal, structured assessment, you can't say this is the person's problem or that is the person's problem. So a person might walk into my office or Kara's office and say, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I've been going through. We don't jump and say, oh, I know what it is. That's depression. That's whatever it is. We have to go through a protocol. And so you don't determine that you know what someone is experiencing just because you see something and it looked like somebody who you didn't know who had this thing and it was this. The other thing I want to say, and it is a little more personal, is that we don't know what a person's struggle is. So you look at someone, you look at a camel and you see somebody put a straw on that camel's back and then the camel collapsed. And you think, what a weak camel. But you don't know the lumber and the iron and the load that camel has been carrying for how many years. That silly metaphor there is that is to say that sometimes we see people seemingly crumbling under what appears to us to be nothing. This little thing you're crying over, but you don't know the years and the intensity of the struggle that that person has been enduring for a long time. And so when you see people in their struggle, refrain from making judgments, refrain from making trivial comments, refrain from labeling them, because not only are they unhelpful, they are in fact harmful. And so if I'm struggling, and then the people who see my struggle are adding to that by saying negative things about me, you're just making it worse. And if I am in a position where I feel hopeless and helpless, and I feel like maybe the best way out is to check out, and then you come and you say, man, you is some weakling body, this little stupidness, that how does that help me to get stronger? And so we have to be careful about, one, commenting and labeling, and two, trivializing, because you do not know a person's struggle. Trauma is subjective. And so I use my wife and myself as examples. Now, my wife she always says that injections don't hurt. I can't understand. I can't understand, because we can take the same injection, I can be in pain, and she's like, that didn't hurt. And so I embarrassed myself in public um, to say that what might be, two people might go through the same experience and perceive it completely differently. And so we can't decide that we can't decide that because it's not painful for me, it shouldn't be painful for you. All of us have our own experiences, and we need to allow people to feel safe and to feel comfortable experiencing it their way. I could go on and on, because I mean, how can we get people to stop trivializing that? There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we need to talk about, but we don't have all the time. So we can touch on we'll introduce the conversation this evening.
Excellent. So first up, stop trivializing my fear of vaccines. Please. When I see a needle,
All right.
it doesn't matter how fine. It looks like the hose the fire service does use. And I have
I can completely relate to that.
I have serious issues with needles. So please, we're saying this to the folks. Don't trivialize our experiences with needles. All right. My wife and I went to have the COVID vaccine, and I had to tell the nurse, listen, hold up. She already had the thing out, the vaccine, the syringe, the needle is there. And I'm thinking, hold up, you ain't pushing it in me hand yet. I got bill of mine first before you can actually put it in my hands. And my wife was like, just go and done. And I'm thinking,
I
hold
have
up,
to beg the nurse not to humiliate me in front of my wife.
So I understand what you're saying. But both of you spoke about our rush to comment, our rush to label. And we've got a lot of Facebook specialists, armchair specialists, who always knows what everybody else is suffering from. And they have a ready solution. And like both of you have said, it actually trivializes the person's experiences, because you don't take the time to actually listen. You've already concluded what they're going through, and you have already decided this is going to be the next step. We are in a pandemic, and this is the reality that we're dealing with. And lots of people are under pressure. People who've lost jobs, people who you're wearing a mask all day. You're not accustomed to that. You're still struggling with that. Children are home more hours than they used to. And so lots of people are under pressure. Lots of parents are under pressure. In some cases, parents are going to work and have to leave children at home. And you're at work all day studying. I wonder if they pick up a match and light something and the house burn. And all these kinds of pressures are on people. In our men's group, we were talking about the fact that the watering holes, as my grandparents used to say, and the watering holes in Orange Walk and Stabrook Market is populated, and we saw that as a bad thing. But then we understand it wasn't just about the drinking; it was about the socializing. Men have an opportunity to talk to other men. It's not the best way, but that's what they do. How we're in this pandemic for a year and more. And this is stressful. This is pressuring. What can we say to people who may be feeling pressured and stressed in this time, particularly when it comes to their mental health?
So, a couple of quick things that I'm going to say. I'm not going to go into the comments that the two of you have made on your fear of needles. We're not going to talk about those kinds of issues this evening, but I do like how we'll use that as in a storytelling way to say that everybody's experiences are different. And I wanted to follow on before I go into talking about responding to the question that you posed. I wanted to say that there are a couple of ways that I think are really important for us to acknowledge. First of all, if we are going to stop labeling people and really try to start helping people, that does have to start with an individual decision. It does have to start from a place where you are thoughtful, where you can be compassionate, where you can see people as human beings, and treat them as you would like to be treated if you were in that kind of position, if you were in that position. There are things as well. I mean, social pressure does have a lot to do with that. So if the majority of us are acting in ways appropriate or more thoughtful and compassionate, as I've mentioned, then others may feel more inclined to participate in exhibiting that kind of behavior, rather than if the majority of us are pulling out phones and taking videos of people doing all sorts of things. Then we see a case where community-based, everybody kind of, not everybody, but majority to follow suit with that. So it does start with an individual decision. We don't have to wait on everybody to be in the same boat with us. We do need leaders who will push that proverbial train, truck, car, tractor, whatever have you, up the hill to getting to the place where we want to be, where we are really tackling mental matters, mental illnesses, and things such as stress and pressure. I smiled when you started to talk about the pressures of adulthood. I literally, if I could show you this thing that I have written on the paper, I have a couple of things here, but somewhere over here, it literally says pressures of adulthood. It's something that I jotted down before you said it. And when you said it, I said, ha, I have it on my list of things that I want to mention as we continue the discussion. So I'm happy you brought it up that way. And you've given us some really great examples of little things that we overlook again. So things like the kids being home from schools, going to school online, and the kind of time we have to invest in that, leaving them home to go to work, having a caregiver to be with them. Of course, things that we all deal with regardless of whether or not we're in a pandemic. So bills still got to be paid. The work situation might not be the same, might be very irregular. A lot of people have been laid off from work, or their load has been reduced, so their hourly wages and those kinds of things have been reduced, but they still have the same bills. Courts are still called when the month come, so people have so many different things that they're dealing with that I broadly define as pressures of adulthood. And I wanted to tie in some other things as I respond to, I don't know if I would call it advice, but some of the things that I'll say to that, those pressures and stresses that we deal with during the pandemic. So one of the things that we tend to really neglect and ignore, and why I made sure that I mention it, even though I don't always or usually mention it when I'm introducing myself to say specialize in work and organizational psychology, is because I find more and more that we are overlooking the implications and the impact of work on who we are, on how that defines us, on what we do with our regular day. If we think about it outside of pandemic time, where we literally spent hours commuting to work every day. And I'm just talking about, when I say outside of the pandemic time, I'm just talking about those who have the privilege of working from home. There's still people who are not working from home, who are doing what I'm describing in terms of waking up every morning, making tea, breakfast, lunch, packing bags, and those are things, looking after the kids, then traveling to work, then doing their shift, whether that's 8 hours, 10 hours, I don't know how long, and then spend time travel home. You might stop and pass by the market, pick up two things before you get home. Then you're gone home. That is not time to rest yet. You got other things to do at home. You got to make sure the kids are okay. If you're single, you don't have kids, I mean, that's still a different story. You still have your own things that you're thinking about, things that you have to do, things on your agenda and schedule. But people deal with all of this, and we spend a lot of our time kind of functioning around rather than work functioning around us. And one of the big things that I wanted to say is we think about how we, I don't want to say work through this pandemic, but how we continue with our everyday lives, how we continue to look after ourselves and take care of our health and wellness has a lot to do with what we call social support. Before I talk about that really, really quickly, I just wanted to say when I talk about taking care of our mental health and wellness, I want to be able to make sure that I stress whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter what your gender is, as an individual, as a human being, as a person, it's very important to recognize that we all have needs in terms of how we care for ourselves. So when we talk about mental health, we're not talking about mental illness. We're talking about mental wellness. We're talking about how you balance your work and your life, how you balance social activities, how you balance and prioritize your friends, your family, how you get involved in community-based activities, or whether you spend more of your time just working, whether work is stressful, whether there are a lot of deadlines, whether there's a lot of physical or mental strain that comes with that, whether there's anxiety, whether there's discomfort with the people that you work with, whether there's conflict between you and your boss. Those are all things that we have to deal with or consider. Some may be luckier than others, quote unquote lucky, if you want to term it that way, because as Mr. Campbell said, everybody deals with things differently. Their trauma looks different, so not because you might be taking that lightly means I'm going to be taking that lightly. So there's so many intricate things that we're dealing with, and psychosocial support is really important, a really important part of that. So counseling is one part of how we support each other, how you can be supported if you're dealing with, if you're struggling with mental wellness, if you need support. And this doesn't have to be a mental illness, as I said. You could be feeling overwhelmed, anxious, stressed. You could be feeling sad. We might not term that as depression, but you might be dealing with loss or grief or something in particular that's tied to the sadness or other symptoms that are tied to what it is that you're dealing with right now. You could be dealing with issues with your confidence, your self-esteem, all of the things that holistically as psychologists we would love to work with people on. We'd love to be able to help and support people in these ways. But there are other things that we can do when I talk about psychosocial support. So we need to think about things like, and Mr. Campbell raised it in what he calls, and I'm sorry to raise this on you, Mr. Campbell, a rant on Facebook, about how seriously we take mental health and wellness from a workplace position. And he talked about the importance of having what's called mental health days, and that's exactly what I call them as well. And it's something that I've spoken about for a while, maybe not always to the right people, but I think just as it is important to say, boss, I'm going to take some sick days, and you go to a doctor and you get a medical leave and you submit that and you're entitled to those sick days and you get paid for them. Mental wellness, mental health, mental illness, those things that you should be able to take your mental health days for. I'm not going to have an argument about how many days you should have. We can go into talking about who can give you that certificate to take into work and those kinds of things. But I'm starting a conversation I'm continuing a conversation to say that those things are important for us. So we do need to have time off for ourselves. Sometimes we don't feel like going to work and we already take it, but we don't call it the holidays. There are people who just don't feel like going to work today and they call and they say, boss is sick. And they're not physically sick, but they're also not, they're drained. They're going to work. They're not there. The spirit and feel like coming today. So they decide to take a day, but they call it a sick day. And that's something that you have to justify if you prolong it with a physical reason for being absent. But those are important. Other things like having community involvement, community support, having your family and friends there, having people who support you, people you can talk to, people you can trust, people who are not going to run around talk your business. I always tell people you need at least one friend that you can really trust to talk to. And you can tell that everything, but that's fine. You can choose what you want to say to them. But it's important that is somebody that you can trust, that can trust you as well, that y'all can talk about your issues, that, there's confidence in there, so that it doesn't necessarily mean we all need to go and see a psychologist, but it just means we do need to have somebody. And it's important that we don't trivialize those things and think, oh, we don't need to talk about these issues. Now, men in particular, and I'll leave it here and Mr. Campbell can pick up on it, but men in particular don't like to talk to people. They don't like to talk to each other. They're very uncomfortable with what they say to each other. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my perception as a female. I'm not going to talk about them, about men not necessarily wanting to talk to women about their problems, but I don't see it as very strong communication lines between each other in terms of bringing up what's stressing you out, what's bothering you, unless probably it's something financial. And your friend could help you out with some money, and so for borrow by the time try to work things out. But men have this, I think, something that is intrinsically taught to them and cultured in them, that they have to be strong. So if you need support and if you need counseling, and if you need to talk to your friend and cry with your friend, and I'm happy that some men have friends that they can cry with, but a lot of men don't have that level of comfort with anybody, including their spouses or their partners or whomever they have that are supposed to be the closest people in their lives. They don't have people that they think they can trust to say this to, and they feel like these things are going to come back up in their face, and people are going to bring it back up or talk with somebody about it, or it's just not issues that they should be dealing with. And so I'm happy that light and attention on specifically on men's issues, on men's mental health and wellness, because we expect men to be strong. And as a woman, we want you to be strong too, but we also not trying to kill you either. We also care. We're also very concerned. I know there are times when women will beg their spouse to talk to them, and they're not going to get, I guess, what they want. Or we're hoping for, or the kind of opening that they're hoping to get. And some women probably abuse that as well. But yeah, I'll stop there. Those are the things that I'll say. There's so many intricate things. And so even when Will was talking, I was saying, there are multiple layers. It's not just one issue. It's not always this one thing. This girl got my problems, and this is why this is what happened. It's not one thing that's happening to somebody. People have many things that they're dealing with, and they deal with them in their own ways. And not because you don't deal with it that way, or you think you wouldn't deal with it that way, gives you a right to judge anybody. Thank you.
I want to reiterate, Reverend Dr. Chase. I want to reiterate for emphasis, just to ensure that people get this, and that is that the common everyday stressors, what you call the pressures of adulthood, and what some people call adulting, just being an adult and having responsibilities and having a list of things to do, and some of them appearing to be impossible. Your bills stall and your money short, and those things, having to deal with those things every day, having to, get up and not sleep during the night because baby has a fever. All of those things add up, and they create what we call stress. And stress, if it is chronic, if it is prolonged, or if it is intense, could in fact disrupt your body chemistry and disrupt the way your brain works. And so it is important for us to find avenues to deal with these everyday stressors as they accumulate. And that is why I really believe, and I've been thinking about this a lot more over the past year or two, that everybody should do a regular mental health checkup, where you can sit down with someone and actually just unburden, unload. This is not about going to see if you're mentally ill or not. This is just taking an opportunity to get some of those things that have been bothering you off your chest. And any therapist would tell you, in fact, anybody would tell you, that to sit down and be listened to in a non-judgmental environment, that alone, even if that person doesn't offer any solutions, just being able to say what is burdening you without being judged and without being trivialized and without being labeled, helps you feel better. And people should be allowed to do this. And to talk about the whole connection with health and work, and this is Kara's domain. I really believe that well, particularly in the private sector, what is most important is the bottom line. But it is people who help you get there. It is your human resources that help you get there. And so it is important to take care of your human resources. And sometimes that care means mental health care. And so it means that every once in a while, someone might need to go see their therapist, might need to go see their counselor, their psychologist, their psychiatrist, and they might come to ask for time off. And because in Guyana we are kind of, traditionally we don't pay a lot of attention to mental health. Very often people are afraid to come because they don't feel like this is going to be seen as something that is important enough to get time off for. And so I am advocating that people be able to go to their bosses and say, look, I need to go see my therapist. I think it should be normalized. It should be normalized, just like someone can come and say, I'm late today because I had to go to the doctor. It should be normal, and it should be acceptable, and you get more out of people who are mentally at ease, people who are emotionally at ease. I mean, if I am thinking about courts coming to my house, or my baby who is sick, or my wife who's given me trouble, or whatever it is, I cannot produce the way, to full capacity at work. And so I feel like employers, and we kind of segue here, but I feel like employers could do with an understanding, a better understanding of how helpful it would be if they would add mental health concerns to their human resource. I'm not. Kara's going to help me finish this sentence, but
I
as part of the human resource package.
I have to agree with you, and I'm agreeing with you both, because it is not something we talk about. People have real mental health issues, and we're not talking about depression only, self-esteem issues, and so many other issues. They're stressed, and you drag yourself out of bed and you go to work, and you may snap at somebody at the workplace, and people just dismiss, oh, you're just having a bad day, and they hope that by the end of the day you're going to, don't talk to him today, he's just having a bad day. You're leaving me in a space where I've had all these things going on in my head, and then you leave me
Pardon
because
me
I'm
for
having a bad
interrupting you. I have to say this before I forget. One of the things that we trivialize and that is common to all of us is loss, and
Mhm.
particularly loss of a loved one. And that can happen in several ways, but I'm going to focus on someone, losing someone, dying. And so somebody might lose a loved one, and you give them a day to go to the funeral, and that's it. But that person may need more than that. And there's sometimes when people 6 months down the line, they still haven't been able to properly grieve. And grief and mourning are two different things. We don't
Mhm.
necessarily understand that. So the person may not be mourning, but the person might still be grieving, and we don't appreciate that. And we would say very insensitive things like, I mean, you still look along the person dead and gone, and or the person they old already, they don't live the life. And we gotta be very careful about that, and we have to appreciate, first of all, that not everyone grieves the same way, and that grieving is a process, and that sometimes people need time to move past that. So that's another of the things that we could have challenges with in the workplace. I remember once I was managing an organization, and someone had lost a spouse 10 days after the wedding. So the spouse died suddenly right after the wedding, and there was I felt that I had a background in psychology since then, so I knew that this was not going to be easy for that person. So I said to the person, take all the time you want. But someone more senior than me said, we got work to do here. We can't just, and so that I think is very often the prevailing attitude towards people going through negative, difficult situations. And we feel, the person actually said, when my mother died, and I was at work the next day, and that kind of thing. We have to change that mentality. We have to change that, and we have to understand that everybody experiences things in their own way.
Cara, I'm coming back to you.
Thanks, Mr. Campbell. Yeah, just thank you so much, Reverend Doctor. There are two quick things that I want to say. Will talked about having this mental health checkup as he frames it. I wanted to share, I really wanted to take the opportunity, as he mentioned it, to share As a psychologist, this is something that I have done. And the irony about it is that we only get to do it with other psychologists. So it's quite interesting because as a professional going to another profession saying, hi, let me have a session with you, is not always something that everybody's willing to do. But I had a colleague who was offering some free sessions at the time. And I said, I will take advantage of this. And I had not done it before, but I know psychologists will share with each other and they'll unburden themselves and those kinds of things. And sometimes, most times, to kind of consults and therapy based things, but this was for me. This was a session that was just for me. And so when Will shared that suggestion openly, I was going to say privately to you guys, I did this and this session was, and I stopped at was because I could not describe what that session, what it felt like, what the experience was, something very indescribable to me. And if this is the first time that you're meeting me or you're hearing from me, you know that that is difficult to believe. I've said so much on the program already. I think I've taken up a lot of the talk time that the men should have on the program. So it's hard to believe that I would not be able to describe it. But I'll tell you what, I would like to think of myself as a contributing member of who functions on a daily basis. There's some days I get up and I don't feel like it, and I don't, if I don't really have to. And there's some days I barely pull myself through the day. It depends, day to day, right? But I'd like to think that I'm a good contributing member of society who has good capacity and good reasoning and those kinds of things. So I say that you will not normally categorize me, and we like to categorize people as somebody who has mental health issues or is unstable or unwell or is ill in that way. But I went to this session. I did not know what we would talk about. But it was really a time where I could talk about anything that I wanted to talk about. Things that I didn't normally get to talk about, things that I wouldn't normally say to people, because I knew this was a confidential session. Nobody else was going to this or anything like that. And we didn't have to talk about it again if that was something that I didn't want to do. So I took advantage of this session, and it was such a phenomenal time where I literally had to force myself not to cry in the session. I felt so overwhelmed, unburdening myself. And I didn't even say half of the things that I could say in that session. That was just one session. And you know what it really helped me to do is to realign myself with the goals that I have for me. So it wasn't a session about what was stressing me out, what was bothering me, what I feel fatigued about, what my list of duties look like. And I literally have a list that I write down every week, and I have a day to day and what I'll do every day and those kinds of things. And I tick them off as I go along. The session wasn't about that. It was really about helping me to realign. And that was my plan from the start, but it went in that direction because that's what I spoke very strongly about. Just realigning myself with my goals I'd like to do and where I am in right now and how old I am and what I'd like to do by when. And, just talking around those things were really revelations for me. And I'm saying that to say that there are issues that we think are simple issues or life things that if we could trash them out outside of our brain, in person, or just hear ourselves saying things, then it helps us in our sense making process, in making sense of what we're doing and how we're doing it and what's important to us, what we want to prioritize, what we want to give more time to, whether we want to exercise, whether we want to eat better, whether we're doing all those things, why are we not happy, what else we need to be doing. These are simple things that we take for granted, but they're things that we need to address because they do affect us. They do affect how happy we are. They do affect how well we feel. They do affect our energy levels. Mr. Campbell mentioned chronic stress, prolonged stress over a period of time has physical implications for your body, for your physical health and wellness. So we're thinking some things as just in your mind, but it's not just in your mind. Your mind is really in control of the systems that are in it. It sends messages. It's telling me how to wave my hands right now, even though those are things that I seem to be doing just without thinking about it. My mind is processing those things and sending those messages. And so if your mind is not healthy, automatically that filters down to your body in a very physical way. And so that's something to really pay attention to. The other thing I wanted to say really quickly is finishing Will's sentiments about having things that are ingrained in our care packages for employees. Usually what companies will do is they'll say, well, you can get some insurance through us and we'll help you with that. So you get some life insurance or some health insurance or some dental. And we'll put together a pension plan for you. And so whenever you finish working for we and you retire and so, well, you're going to have the little bit of money there after that and we look after you in that way. But there's so much more that companies in Guyana in particular and in the region as well are still neglecting to do. And it's not to say that, because international companies are doing these things in different places means it's not about following suit. One of the things that a couple of years back, I think 2017 or 2018, was to look at the labor laws in Guyana. And I compared it with some of the labor laws in the US and in the UK in particular. And I looked at how the labor laws are structured in a way that seems to be more for the organization or for the company and for the benefit of the company rather than for the individual and for the human resource and the people who are working in the company. It did not compare really well to making sure that there was a prescriptive policy line which really took care of the employee themselves. If you look at labor laws in the UK and it might be something that people are interested in as they think about. So we talked about having mental health days off. These are realistic things that they're doing right now. In the UK, you're entitled to X amount of days per year as your mental health days. If you need more than that, you can apply for more than that. There's paid leave time. You have a certain amount and your job continues to work with you depending on whatever it is. They follow up with your therapist as well and those kinds of things to get progress reports and they're happy to support you in this way. And it is not just whether or not the company is happy. That is the legal entitlement of an employee. You can't fire an employee because they're mentally ill. You can't refuse to hire an employee because they have some mental illness. Once they can do the job, once they're qualified for the job, there's no reason for you to attach any stigma, discriminate against them, and not hire them. Or if you are contributing, organizations are stressing employees out, but if you're contributing to the daily stresses of what an individual is dealing with, and then this person is so overwhelmed that they have what we call, not necessarily psychologists, but we in Guyana call a nervous breakdown, or they run mad, or they're gone crazy, or they're not functioning normally anymore. You just decide, well, you can't work here anymore. We need to help each other. We need to help each other. And so one of the very, very easy things that companies can do is have an employee assistance program. Employee assistance programs work to ensure that employees have additional care that's tied to their mental health. And those could be activity-based, those could be based, those could be counseling based kinds of support that employees need and that they have access to as they need it. Whether or not they need it, it's there, it's available for those who need it in an equitable way. So those are very simple things that companies can say, we spend a little bit more, and you know how much more you can get out of somebody who sees that you care for them, somebody who recognizes that their workplace is taking the time to do these things for them. People are so appreciative of that. I am appreciative when I my place of work showing caring in different ways, whether it's contributing to people who need it, whether it's doing training, capacity building, whether it's giving me money, funding to go to a conference so that I can share my psychological findings, or I can also engage in continuing education. Those are things that make sure that your employees are satisfied on the job. People think it's about money, and it is sometimes, but no matter how much money you get, you'll never be happy. You're never totally satisfied. You'll always you keep spending just to at that level. So if you get more money, you're not going to stay where you are. You're going to, other bills going to come in. You're going to take something else. And I know we keep picking on chords. We got other places and singers and Keishars and wherever else you can take from. But we know this course is really call you. So we're picking on chords tonight. But you're going to go and do other things with that money. The things that really matter is how we treat them. and the love, the appreciation, the respect that we show them. And from an organizational place, we can easily show our staff. You can show whoever I'm talking to right now, your staff, whether it's a small team, whether it's a medium-sized or large team, that you care by doing little additional things to make sure that they're supported. And it will definitely improve things like their productivity. It will improve their satisfaction, and it will improve as well their commitment to your organization, which means that you will have less days of people not showing up to work because they know you don't care when they're not feeling well, and you'll also have less instances of employee turnover and those kinds of things, which means that you have to go through a rehiring process and an induction and an orientation, all of those which cost money that you can avoid doing. Sorry, that's it there. The two things that I wanted to say, that's it there. Thank you so much.
Oh boy, this is great stuff. This is great stuff. And I know we're talking to the employers because we also understand the corporate responsibility as well. I remember I was working for a company, and one of the staff walked into the office, and she just rattled off for about an hour. And I'm sitting there at my desk listening to her rattle off. And then when she was finished, she said, "Thank you. You really helped me a whole lot." And at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, but I said nothing. But it was just a moment for her to dump um, all that she was going through. She cried. She was in tears, but she dumped and she dumped. And when she was finished dumping, she says, "I'm good to go. Thank you for that." Um, I was reading an article recently where somebody was saying this 48 hours weekend is not enough for us. We need more hours. And the response was, well, there's a reason why the 48 hours weekend is not enough, because when we finish doing your 40-hour week, Saturdays and Sundays, we got clean the house, we're back at work again and trying to do the things that are supposed to bring ease and distress us. And those things are causing even more stress. So when we return to work on Monday, we are just as stressed as when we left on Friday. I was reading an article as well. I think yesterday or sometime yesterday, I think it was, where a bartender quit his job because his boss messed with him at 3 o'clock in the morning to say, "I need you to come into work at 11 o'clock." And he says, "I'm not coming in. This is my day off. You have to have some respect for me having my day off, because on my day off, I want to unwind. I want to rest. And you're calling me. And if you wanted me to come in on my day off, you could have done that earlier. You could have let me know that earlier." And so we've got to deal with these kinds of stresses in the workplace. I have a friend who works in the US, and he, because of the work he did, he got into an altercation with a customer, and the customer assaulted him, and the company sent him to the therapist, sent him to the psychologist. "You need to go talk to the psychologist." And I'm saying, bro, you Guyanese, them thing this happened to us, and we pick ourselves up and move on. But the reality is the company recognized that this could have scarred him. And so they sent him to get the requisite treatment that was necessary to help him stay focused. I'm saying all of that because in the last 2 years of this pandemic, while we are a young nation, this issue of um, mental health and mental health days is becoming a growing topic because people need it. People need it. People need it. We can't stress it enough. Um, it is a whole host of stuff that we've never dealt with before, and the pressures of that. Um, and so I know as a young nation, this is something that we are dealing with. But I think it is also an opportunity for us to examine and recalibrate. And that is what I believe is not happening. There isn't an examination, whether it is in the church or outside the church, whether it's in the community or outside wherever. There isn't that intentional examination of what is going on so that we can recalibrate. People are all over the place, and they're struggling. They are really, really struggling. And so, as we talk about mental health and mental wellness, where do we see this going? what's the next step? We talk to we're talking to corporate, we're talking to individual, but what is the next practical step for people in this process?
All right, so I want to say that one area in which we are lacking as a nation is I'm not sure that we understand at the level of policy making the importance of mental wellness and mental health support. I am not sure that we understand that at a policy making level. There are things that happen at our jobs that are potentially traumatic. And there are some jobs where those things are inherent. For example, if I'm a firefighter, if I'm a police officer, if I'm a doctor or a nurse, I'm going to be confronted with the reality of death on a regular basis. And death is not something that the human brain was equipped to deal with. So it is going to be traumatic for me, but we don't take it seriously because people, they deal with it and then they come to work tomorrow and you think, oh, yeah, all right, he's strong, his shoulders, he back broad. Um, but it has left a mark. It has left some injury, some psycho-emotional injury, and so we don't put anything in place to take care of of those issues, and so we have a lot of people going about their daily lives normally, quote unquote, but there's a lot of scarring and there's a lot of injury. And what I have noticed is that we have become as a people so much less compassionate. And it's hard to be compassionate when you yourself are injured and hurt and torn. And so I wonder sometimes, as a country, why are we so compassionate? It never, I've never been able to forget. This happened about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I stopped in traffic to allow an elderly lady to cross the street. And there were cars behind me honking their horns. And I thought that maybe they didn't see why I stopped. And there was this guy who drove up and, and they almost hit the lady. And as he passed, he cursed at me, let you wait. And I thought to myself that, well, where are we if to wait 10 seconds to allow an elderly person who could be our mother or a grandmother to cross the street, we can't do that. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that so many of us are so scarred that we are trauma fatigued, and so we don't have empathy and sympathy and compassion and kindness left. And so we you see somebody walking down the street and they look a little something, and instead of being empathetic or helpful, you hurl insults at that person, you say negative things about that person, or you try to score likes. So it has to, changes have to be made at a policy level, and we don't have enough time to talk about those changes. But more importantly, changes have to be made at an individual level, and we have to examine ourselves and do what we need to heal from our own traumas, so that we're in a better space and able to provide, able to be more compassionate and more supportive and more empathetic to those with whom we come in contact on a daily basis.
I think I heard Cara alluding to it earlier. As a society, and I'm going to make a broad statement, we have serious trust issues as a community of people. We have got serious issues of trust in this nation. And let me not even deal with it at the political level. It is played out every single day at the political level. Even today, one minister said, oh, they're represented. And I know you got a trust issue when you are trying to pull wool over my eyes and you think you fix a problem when you create another one. And that's the issue of trust. How do we help people in our society that have been hurt by others, have said things in confidence that came out when they said it to somebody they trust? They spoke about, listen, I'm struggling with this thing. And when themselves and that person have a disagreement, they hear it back about, oh, you did tell me you're struggling, and you know, long and already mad, and those kinds of comments we hear. How do we help people in a society like this, where trust is a major factor if we are even going to access the services of mental health professionals? Trust is a major factor when it comes to accessing those services. What do we say to people in a society like this so that they know they can trust the professionals?
Yeah, thanks, Reverend Doctor. What are we?
Go ahead, Tara. Go ahead.
Well, I will try not to be long, but I was looking at some things coming in the chat, and I wanted to say something really quickly before I respond to that question in my own way, and I'm sure Will has his recommend as well. Somebody talked about grieving, where loss is regarded, and I know Will talked about people having time off for grieving, for mourning, and those kinds of things. And something I forgot to say is that is an intermittent kind of thing. So sometimes we expect that, and I've worked in a couple of places, not many full time, because I don't like to be tied much. So University of Guyana is very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate as well. But what I find is that, some places, let's say it's a close family member, they say, okay, well, we give you 3 days for that. You get 3 days off, bereavement leave for that. And then if it's an extended family member, you get a day and you just at the funeral, and then you come back to work as if nothing happened. But the thing is about it, even if we give somebody a week, 10 days, of leave right away at that time, that's not necessarily going to help that situation. It depends on the person. So, I mean, these are very practical things that organizations can think about. And I know I'm taking us back to this conversation. One, organizations can think about flexible work schedules. So whether or not you have a certain time that you need to be there, whether we can rotate the schedule, whether you can work from home some days, those kinds of things. And they can also think about how your leave might be intermittent. Your bereavement leave might be intermittent. So you might take a day, yes, to go to the funeral. You might take 2 days that you just want to take care of arrangements and those kind of things. But what happens next 2 months? When you feel it again, and it comes back up, and you need to take that time. You can't go back to your boss and say, boss, I need a bereavement day. You can't. There's no room to do that. And so what I find that we are doing, even though we are psychologists, and there are a very limited amount of us here in Guyana who are trained professionals in psychology, we can do a lot to support people as psychologists. But my struggle with it is that we still continue to send people back out in systems that are flawed, that are weak, that are not built to give additional support to people as well. The other thing I want to say is I know that you are aware that are aware as well, there are multiple sources of support, places where you can get support, and some of it is free. So for example, the Guyana the hospital has their mental health unit. They have psychologists and psychiatrists on staff who are there to diagnose and diagnose mental illnesses, and also to deal with whether you need counseling, whether that's a social issue or whether that's a prolonged chronic issue. They're there to support you, and that's a free that's available. We also have a very small handful of professionals who are trained, and they do private practice, and they offer therapy, they offer counseling support, they offer those same kinds of things like mental health checkups. Just if you want to do 1-2 days of a check-in, and you want to do that irregularly, even organizations want to do that for their employees, and that's maybe a every other year thing that they want to do. Those are things that are possible to do in a private way as well. Back to the instance of trust. The first thing I want to say is tied to our social relationships. I alluded to it before, and we didn't dive into it too much, but there are obvious cases and instances where I think we've all been victim of, where we probably, how to navigate this, we probably placed too much trust in advance, or we probably thought we could trust somebody, and it came back to bite us, and we regret it. So we gave this person too much information, and then it turns into a once bitten twice shy kind of scenario where we don't know who else to trust, we don't know who to turn to, we're not sure what will happen. And I'm saying that we've all been fallen prey to this, we've all been subject to it, because I've been as well. And so because of that, I am very selective about who I will talk to and what I will say to you. That's why I said, even when I went to that counseling session, I knew it was a confidential session. I knew the person was a professional. I knew there was no room of error where they were going to go tell anybody anything that I said. I knew that this was a professional at that level. But I still was very selective with what I said and how much information I'm also very selective about not talking other people's things. So sometimes somebody will ask me about a family member or a spouse, or my kid or whoever, and I say, that's not my story to tell. If it's something about me that I feel comfortable telling you, then that's fine. But sometimes there's things outside of that I'm just not willing to share with you. And so we have to be very selective. And I'm not saying that in a way that means that we need to be closed off to people. I'm saying that in a way that we recognize that trust is something that we navigate with people. It's not just an automatic thing that we give. And I like to be in situations, I don't know how other people feel, but I like to be in situations where if I feel like I can trust you, you feel like you can trust me, so that there's some kind of mutual support that's happening there. And I find it works well. So if I'm going to tell you something very private about me, I expect you to be able to tell me something very private about you, so that I hold these secrets there too. And so we're sharing these, and we're navigating confidence. There's some people who are very principled in this way, and I respect those and I admire those people. Whether or not you and somebody are friends, whether or not you and somebody are getting along, whatever you know about them, you keep that to yourself. That's a principle that some people hold very firm to. There are other people who, for whatever reason, will not be judging anybody, who likes to go out and they talk about other people, and they say, well, this person said so, and it ends up wrong. Or when you get in an argument with them, you hear back so, and you probably talk about how you helped them, and they owe you because you helped them during that time, and all sorts of things will happen. I'll say this. There are two things that I don't give advice, but these are gentle suggestions. Two things that you can do. One, you do have to be very selective about who you can trust. I'm very selective about who I trust. Some people find it easier a stranger because they don't know the person. They probably never see them again, and they feel comfortable just giving them that information and moving along with their lives. That's a personal decision, but you do have to know who you can trust. I can't tell you who that's going to be. Whether it's going to be mutual trust, those are personal decisions that you have to make. But you can be selective with what information you give to people. You could decide, I'm going to give you X information, and see what they do with it for a while, before you just give them everything. And I'm just saying, exercise caution, because I know these are practical issues that we deal with. The other thing is related to counseling. There's counseling support that's available, as I mentioned, on both private and public levels. And when I say public, it doesn't mean that the counseling is public, but it's available as a public assistance option. It's available to you. But when you do that, I want to say this. Sometimes what will happen and what will scar people is that they'll walk into a counseling relationship expecting professionalism, expecting confidentiality, and knowing that that's something that should be guaranteed. And what I want to say to you, as you walk into any kind of relationship, new relationship, friendship, marriage, whatever it is, as you walk into those relationships, trust is something that you build, that you develop, even with a counselor. So I always encourage people, if you're going into a new counseling relationship, don't be afraid to ask questions of your counselor. Don't be afraid to ask them anything that you want. They can choose what they want to answer, but there's certain things that you have a right to know. If you want to ask them about their background, about their education, about their years of experience, about the type of work they've done, about the issues that they're passionate about socially, or whether they're activists or whatever the case is, you can ask them those questions, and those kinds of things build what we call rapport. And a part of that is having a trusting relationship, a relationship where you feel like you can open up and really talk to people. It's different in a counseling scenario because people who are trained professionals, we are how should I say it? There's this mechanism built in to what our contract is like. And so we have a responsibility beyond the norms of social intricacies and interactions to make sure that we are very careful and delicate with how we use the information that's given to us by you. And so we usually outline those instances, and make sure that you're aware of what confidentiality means and those kinds of things. And if there are any clauses in between that will cause a breach to confidence. So if you have serious issues trusting people, then I mean the best thing to do would be to go to a professional. Probably it's the easiest thing to do, because then there's a certain responsibility that we have to make sure that that trust is implicit, is built into the kind of relationships that we have. But I mean, we can all go to professionals, which is why I always say you got to have at least one good friend that you know that you can trust, that you know that you can talk to, be there for you. And as you said, Reverend Doctor, sometimes all people need is to talk. You don't know how helpful you are to somebody by just listening. And when I say just listening, what some people try to do is as they listen to people, they're thinking about how that story, how they relate to that, something else that happened to them similar, something else that they hear about with somebody else, they tell them that they can share as soon as the person stops talking. Or they think about what advice they can give to this person to fix the issue. People don't always need you to fix their issue. If they need some advice from you, they can say, well, what do you think I should do? If they don't say, well, what do you think I should do? It is not your place to say, well, I think you should do X, Y. Sometimes people just want to talk, to get things off the chest, to say it out loud, to let somebody hear them, to make sure that they're okay, to make sure that they say this out loud. This is going to sound plausible. Sometimes you just need that. And having somebody there for that can be a very releasing experience, can be a very opening and freeing experience. It gets things off your chest, and then you feel like, yes, I could handle tomorrow because I did this today, and mentally and physically and spiritually, I feel well with myself, and I can now tackle what's going to happen next to me.
All right. So to piggyback on what Cara said, I mean, Cara talked about trust in two different types of relationships. So trust in your social relationships, and then trust in the counselor client relationship. And I want to quickly touch on the social relationship part of it, and that is to say this: blood is not always thicker than water. I'm saying this because it is natural to think that someone who is closely related to you is going to be trustworthy. And it goes against it is traumatic, to maybe overuse the word, when somebody who is supposed to have your back because your blood doesn't. And I've often had to share with clients the reality that sometimes we have to choose our family, and sometimes we have to find new family. In other words, those things that you may have expected from the people who are your blood, they may not have it to give, but there are other people whom, and I'm Christian, so I got to say it this way, whom God has placed in your life to fill that gap. And so it is okay to depend on those people even more than you depend on your own family, if that is your situation. So, so much for the trust in social interactions. And then we want to talk about trust in mental health support. And uh, a mental health professional is just that. And like Cara said, it is important before you divulge your information, to ensure that this person is in fact a professional, mental health professional, counseling professional. Ask that person questions. And I encourage people who come to me to ask me questions. And one guy, he pretty much grilled me one day, are you married? Because it was a marital issue. And he said, are you married? How long have you been married? Have you ever cheated on your wife? What kind of relationship do you and your wife have? And then he started to ask about my educational background. What qualifications do you have? Where do you study? How long have you been doing this? And he was a little apologetic at the end. He said, man, I'm sorry that I give you the third degree because, I'm really having difficulty trusting people. And I said, no, that you are supposed to do that. That is your right. And I'm supposed to answer those questions. So that is one of, Cara talks about building rapport. It also gives you an idea of whether this is someone that you can trust. Um, and so, like she said, confidentiality is built into the counseling arrangement. It is built into the counseling arrangement. And in other countries, if you are known to breach, if you have been found to breach confidentiality, you lose your license to practice as a therapist or as a counselor or as a psychologist. So real professionals don't run them out. I don't know how much nicer to say that. you know they don't. Confidentiality is built into it, and one way to tell is, do they at the outset set down those confidentiality rules, explain to you the rules that they are bound by and under what conditions they will have to. So let me share this.
Can I interject, Will?
Yes, please. Yes.
Because can we also do that in our relationships with each other? I want to talk to you not as a professional. I want to talk to you as you. But let's make sure we set some boundaries so that what I share with you can stay in this context. You spoke earlier about the guy grilling you. When I went to pastor in my first pastorate, I'm 23 years old. And there was this guy who was having teenage daughters and having troubles with them. And so I turned up as the pastor, with all my nice biblical training, all my nice ideas to say to him. And he said, with due respect, Pastor, you can't talk to me about this. And at first I was offended because I'm pastor, man. How are you going to tell me I can't? But then he says, at the time, my daughter was a baby. He says, your daughter is a baby. You don't understand what I'm dealing with. So I need to talk to somebody else who understands what I'm dealing with. While at first I got angry, I was humble enough to recognize, listen, let me get you the kind of help you need. Because indeed, this is out of my scope. And so I'm trying to, because we need to say to people, you can grill even the people around you that you may choose to talk to. It may not be the professional, but you must be able to say to John, hey, I can talk to you about this thing, but this is what I'm expecting from you. If you know you can't do this, then let me know now so I can go talk to Jenny, who may be more willing. Can we do that in our relationships?
I believe that we can. And I think that Cara alluded to that when she said we have to be very selective about who we choose to talk to, who we choose to trust with our personal information. And so it is okay to set boundaries. Beyond that, and I say this a lot to people in my church, not all of us have the gift of confidentiality. I feel like it's a gift. Not all of us have that gift. And I really believe that if somebody comes to you and you realize they're about to say something that requires confidentiality, and you know in your heart you don't know how to keep things in your chest, tell that person, listen, don't tell me, girl. Don't tell me why. Don't tell me that. Yeah, I wouldn't know what to do with that. And you also alluded to something that I think is very important. A counselor, a therapist, a professional who can be trusted will also be humble enough to say, this is outside of my scope. This is not something that I am equipped to deal with. So I like to think that I'm good at what I do, and I hope I don't come across as boastful there, but I like to think that I'm good at what I do. But there have been cases where what was presented to me was not something that I felt equipped to deal with in terms of my training. Like Cara said at the very beginning, there are different areas of counseling. And very often Cara would refer people to me because she said, my stuff is occupational and this is a little too deep into mental health for me. So can you see this person? A professional, and pastors you have counseling built into your job. And I encourage pastors all the time, if you have not, there are some pastors who have degrees in counseling. Not all of them do. And I am saying, if this is not your forte. Be humble enough to refer. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that. I went to a guy to get some work on my car, and he said, "Bro, I could do up to here, but for this rest here, you gotta carry it to an electrician." I remember once I was doing some work at my house, and the guy said, "Bro, the electrical work me and touching. So bring in an electrician to tie that stuff off, and then I'm going to do my work." The same thing should be done in the counseling experience. If you know that this is outside of your scope, be big enough, because humility is really being big. We think it's making yourself small, but you got to be big to be humble. Be humble enough, be big enough, be honest enough to say, you know what, I can't manage this. Maybe you should see X, Y, and Z person.
So I want to switch gears in the last half an hour that we have, and I want us to talk a little bit about suicide. Um, I'm not allowing Cara to continue talking about this part of it. So switching gears on her tonight. But I want us to talk about suicide, because this is a pandemic level proportion, pandemic levels in Guyana. And we've seen it, young people, old people, young men, old men. We are seeing it in our society. Um, what must we do now? Because I know there is a suicide hotline, and I can't speak to, because while I know that there's a suicide hotline, we don't have any reports. I don't have any report about how well they've done, how many cases they've dealt with. I don't know that, so I can't speak to what they have done. I can only speak from what I see reported in the media, and I know that this is an issue, because I get the impression that some people still don't even know that there's a hotline that they can reach out to, their people that they can talk to. What do we say to family members? What do we say to friends when they begin to get those WhatsApp messages or those text messages that seems to be pointing to a person walking down a dark tunnel, and they don't yet know what to do? Those text messages says, "I'm tired of living. Life has been hard. I don't know what next to do." What do we say to family members? What do we say to friends who may get those text messages, knowing fully well that the person they're dealing with has contemplated and is contemplating suicide? Oh,
So I will say the bits of things that I can see, and I think what it will do is kind of set a base to the conversation, and then Will is more of an expert in tackling these kinds of matters, can talk about it a little bit more in depth if he'd like to, depending on how he responds to things that I say. So first off, I want to say that I think the suicide hotline is an excellent initiative. I know it's there. Persons have on different levels on social media, in their different work capacities, try to spread the word about it. They share the contact numbers so that you know that it's available. I, like you, Dr. Chase, I'm not in a position to report on how effective it's been, how many calls they've taken, whether that's translated directly into saving lives, but it's an excellent mechanism to have, because at least people know that there is a number you can call if there is a sense of hopelessness, if there is a sense of giving up. And and that's important. That's an important step. That's not the only thing that's necessary. But I'll share with you really quickly what I have heard just based on my interactions with somebody I knew that was working and answering the phone suicide hotline. And I'm not going to disclose anything about the person, and I don't know who I'm talking about or anything like that. But I was very surprised, because this was closer to the beginning when it started, and I'm hoping that it's not the same scenario now that we've gotten it for a couple of years now. Because I think when it started, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was a couple of years back. And when it started, this talked about not feeling well trained and prepared to work on the hotline, not really well prepared to take those calls. So it's excellent to have somebody who's there, but somebody who, I don't know if they had a script or if they just expected somebody to know what to say, but somebody who is actually on the phones but not feeling prepared is not a very good sign. The other thing is that this person had shared with me that what a lot of prank calls, so people just really making fun and using the number to call in and make jokes um, and laugh with them and those kinds of things. And they try to discard and they try to say, look, this is a line. This is for people who need help. You know, don't do that. But at the same time, they have to figure out, navigate how to be professional with people who are prank calling the suicide hotline. So I was a bit surprised, a bit taken back to hear that people were doing that, were calling the suicide hotline and joking off about things like mad people and mental health issues and those kinds of things. But I guess that's to be expected, given, you know, it's something that's very taboo, mental illness, and making sure that we take care of ourselves, and whether we need a counselor or a psychologist and those kinds of things are still taboo things to say. So even we, like everybody, go to counsel, have a checkup, a mental health checkup, or whatever the case is. We talk about it very casually. There are a lot of people across the length and breadth of Guyana, and even in the region to some extent, who feel like, you know, this is not necessary. It's not important at all. Even when you were sharing, Dr. Chase, in talking about your friend who was sent to the psychologist for support, that's something that we say to each other. You don't need support. It's fine. You're all right. You're going to be okay. And that's something that we say to people that may reach out to us directly, not necessarily always directly. There's not always a text message. They might be a status on WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram or somewhere. There might be a video that they post on TikTok. And in it, there are hints of this person is dealing with something that they're not happy about, that they're overwhelmed by. We might notice changes in behavior. So usually we'd hear from this person regularly. When we try reaching out to them, we're not hearing from them. It's difficult to contact them. They're not making any effort to reach out to us. And so, you know, this is not normal behavior. We notice that, and we probably shrug it off like, oh, they're having a hard time today. As you talked about those work things, we think this person's having a hard time today. Let's just leave them alone and try again tomorrow. And so we kind of overlook those things, and we think, okay, well, people are dealing with their own things in their own way. That's fine to some extent. People are dealing with things in their own way. But this issue of depression and suicide has, and I'm not even touching on the issue of murder suicide in Ghana. I'm not touching on that. Don't know if you want to bring that up, but that's also an issue. But that's also in a whole hour as well, if we had a segment just on that in particular. But this whole issue tied to depression and suicide, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, the beginning of this discourse that we're having, we recognize that people have their own thing they're dealing with, and it may be multiple things. It may be layers of things. It's not always just one thing. But having a suicide hotline, it's awesome. It's there. I believe it's still there. The numbers shared. Will has shared some of those numbers. I don't know if those persons who are viewing can see those live, but I'm sure that that's something that we can share live is great, excellent. So those are there. But what will happen then is that this is really just a rapid injection. So an on spot. If the thought crosses your mind, or if you're about to attempt it, call a number instead of doing that. There's something else that you can do. Call a friend, use one of the numbers, and there are people who are hopefully by now trained and well prepared. This is at the beginning. I'm assuming that at the beginning, rolling it out, they wanted to make sure they get a number, but they didn't focus so much on training. And I'm sure, not putting my neck on a block, but I'm fairly sure that by now they've done lots of training so that persons are willing to, not just willing to, but able to assist you. And that they also have perhaps persons who are social workers with those kinds of backgrounds, so they know how to speak with somebody who's contemplating this kind of behavior. But apart from that, what we also need to be aware of as well is what happens after that phone call. So whether you're giving assistance at that point, but then where does the assistance go? Call every night? Well, you could, but I mean, how much are you going to get into every night? I don't know. There are other mechanisms of support that are available there, and we need to continue to build on that. That's why I talked about, yes, we have private, but then the system that people are working in every day, the system that people are living in every day, is not optimally conducive to making sure that they're well supported and that their needs are met and that they're taken care of and that we're treating each other as human beings with compassion and empathy and those kinds of things, and love and support and those things, right? So the suicide hotline is there. It's great. But then apart from that as well, we also have counseling support. We also need community support. We also need, and community support is a range of things. So we talk about religious support, activity-based support, things that you can be involved in, interest-based activities and those kinds of things. There is a special branch in the Ministry of Public Health that is specific to adolescent health and wellness, and they tie in very often mental health for adolescents. Will and I were part of a symposium session that they had, I think that was last year already, focusing on adolescent mental health. So even if you're an adolescent, some people really trivialize, we're not going to talk about it too much. Some people really trivialize adolescent issues. So they think this person's a child, their problem could possibly be when I was a child, all we had to do was go to school, you learn, you walk. These children think about that outside of thing nowadays that could be stressing them out. Everybody got their own things. There are children who are playing adult roles. There are children who are doing excessive work, who are taking care of their siblings. They have to navigate being at school as well. What that means for them right now during a pandemic. This is the pandemic talks. So we thinking that this is affecting us. It's not just affecting us as adults. It is affecting our children as well, no matter what age they're at. They have things that they deal with. My son is 6 years old, and sometimes he will say to me that being a child is hard. And I will say to him, boy, it will get harder, but I will teach you how to navigate that. But it's not really getting easier. You are in an excellent time of your life right now, but he doesn't see that. He sees having these rules. He sees having to listen to these people in authority. He sees not being able to do what he wants. He sees having to do school work, and you got homework, and you can't play a game all the time. And he sees that that's stressful to him. It's burdensome to him, and it shouldn't be stressful to us. And so we play down those things. We play down things that are important to people. And if we pay attention to the things that are important to people, we can be instrumental in taking care of, in helping to take care of them, in supporting them. Just listening to them and hearing the things that are important to them is very important. Adolescents have and are significantly affected. The numbers show it, the numbers represent they're significantly affected by issues of depression and suicide. And a part of that is, again, the way that we trivialize their issues, the way that we talk about them not needing to have issues, the way that we think the things that they want to do are crazy, and not being supportive and not being open, not giving them an ear, not listening to them, telling them what to do, just giving them advice, telling them what to do, and they have to do this. They're not individuals, they're not people, they're children. So they have to listen to what the adults say, they have to do what the adults say that they have to do. And yes, we're trying to protect them, but we have to be very, very mindful about how we treat people. They're still people. My child, even though he's 6 years old, is still an individual. He's still a person. He still has feelings. He still has his own thoughts. He still comes and brings a bunch of questions to me that I don't always want to answer. He has dreams. He has things that he wants to do. He's a person. So children are people, and we have to be very mindful. And that's why I said at the beginning of the session, it starts with us. Yes, there are policy level things that we can do. Yes, there are things the government can have in place. Yes, we can have private and public sources of support. Yes, Ministry of Youth, Sport and Culture, I don't know if I'm calling that right, can do all of these activities that they've been doing, the festivities and the sports and all of that they've been supporting. Excellent work that they've been doing in communities. These are excellent things, but it does start with the individual. It starts with us, and we can make some good decisions for ourselves and for those around us that we love.
And if I may jump in on the issue of suicide, I think that a lack of awareness, and it's amazing that we still lack awareness when so much information is available. But be that as it may, we don't really understand, and so sometimes when a person We hear that a person attempts suicide or completes a suicide. We say things like, but you know, life's so sweet. I can't understand how anybody would want to die. Or, you know, when people want to kill themselves, there's nothing you can do to stop them. And I want to say this, that in the vast majority of cases, people who are suicidal really do not want to die. Death is not their desire. Their desire is to end the suffering. Their desire is to escape the pain. And so, in an effort to do that, sometimes your distorted thinking as a result of your depression, because when you're mentally ill or mentally distressed, it makes it difficult to think straight. And so in that distorted thinking, um, you may feel like, you know what, the way to escape this pain is to end it all. And so when a person says to someone else, you know what, I feel like ending it all, that person is not really expressing a desire to die. That person is sometimes in a last ditch effort trying to draw attention to the fact that I am suffering and I feel like I'm at the end of the rope. Can you help me? And it could get really disturbing. And that's one of the reasons I believe that we trivialize these things and we try to brush it off, because you feel helpless. You don't know what to say. And so you say, come on, man, it can't be that bad. But for that person, it is that bad. And sometimes all that person needs to hear is, listen, I got you. I know this is difficult for you, but I got you. Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes that is all a person needs. And I think it was a cartoon where a person who was depressed got up and said, you know, no, could not get up out of bed, because that is one of the symptoms of depression sometimes. Couldn't get out of bed, and was saying to the other person, I just want to lie down here. And the other person went and got a blanket, covered them up, and lay down beside them. And sometimes that is all that that person needs. One of the last things a depressed person wants to hear is, come on, snap out of it. That person is already struggling with the fact that I don't have the capacity to snap out of it, and everybody else expects me. So that's now an additional burden of expectation. And so we need to learn what are the right words to say. We need to learn what to say and what not to say. And sometimes the less you could say is the better.
All right. So we've had so much we've shared tonight, and our time is almost up. We just have about 5 minutes to wrap up. So I'm going to give Cara, let me see. We didn't talk about the trivializing of men's trauma. Um, we will deal with that in our next conversation on pandemic talk. But I'm going to give Cara, of the 5 minutes, 90 seconds to share her closing thoughts. if if you were a preacher, they give you only
Thanks so
30.
much, Reverend Doctor. I would love to see a preacher do that. Um, quickly, what I'll just say is I do appreciate this opportunity to be able to share some of my thoughts. This is not really something that I prepared for in any kind of way I wanted to. If I could have had the questions before. But it was really on the spot things that we were able to really just talk about, just discussion style. And I really appreciated that. And I hope that what we have done is we've shared some useful tips and pointers with you. We don't always do it, but we try to point out some of the issues, some things that you're tackling, that you're dealing with. And we know this is your everyday life. This is our lives as well. So it's not that we got it any better. We live in the same society, in the same system, and we're working to navigate those things as well. And I'm saying that to say that together. So I'm really appreciative to have this opportunity to talk about some of these issues. I look forward to coming back so that we have some other discussions I think that are really important for us to have. And I hope the persons are paying attention or learning. There are always opportunities to learn. There's a mental health and wellness conference that's coming up. It's free. It's in Guyana. It's virtual and it's in person. And it's available to anyone who wants to learn about topical issues in mental health and wellness. And that learning, that response to making sure that you're aware of with you and what's going on with others around you and how you can be mindful of that is a very important part of making that individual decision for yourself to be a caring person, to be a good person, good individual who looks out for their wellness as well as those around them, that they love and that they can support and they have the ability to support. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope that I've been helpful in some way, and I look forward to any other discussions we'll have in the future.
Thank you so much, Cara. You did better than the preachers I usually give 30 seconds to. So I want to thank you, thank you, thank you. Because usually when I give preachers 30 seconds, I'm still here at 9 o'clock. Mr. Campbell.
I feel the need to make it clear that I am not a preacher, so that people know that you were not referring to me. um, Cara used an expression earlier that highlighted something that has been recurring to me, and so I've spoken to quite a few people who've said to me that I am inside of my head too much. And Cara said that sometimes you need to be able to express things so that it is outside of your brain. And one of the things that mental health professionals are able to do is to help you come out of your brain, because sometimes we live inside our own heads, and that conversation goes around in circles, and it just goes faster and faster and faster until we feel like we've lost control. So it is important to be able to meet with a professional who can help us make sense of our experiences. Sometimes just hearing ourselves speak, sometimes hearing it outside of your head helps you make sense of it, and that is what mental health professionals do. There are some misconceptions about what we do. Like one lady said to me, "Y'all manipulate people, or y'all get into people's head and mess around in people's head." It is not that. It is not that complicated. So we help people make sense of their own experience, and very often, what happens is they come up with their own solutions. So, and all we do is facilitate that. I think it is. I want to also draw attention to the hotlines, the suicide hotlines, and those persons who are struggling with suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideas. Please make use of those hotlines, and get the help that you need. You do not have to suffer alone. If it is a case where you are unable to afford the fees of seeing a private counselor, you can see one that is provided by the government through the Ministry of Human Services and through the Ministry of Health and the Adolescent Health Unit, the Mental Health Unit. We have, we have more resources than we had 5 years ago, than we had 10 years ago, and it is getting better. Reach out and get some help. At the very least, reach out to somebody that you can trust and who will listen in a non-judgmental way. It's good. It's great to see you, Carl.
Okay, so let me make sure I clarify. Mr. Campbell is not the pastor I was talking about, nor the preacher I was talking about. So let me just reaffirm that. He did well tonight, though, but when he's liming with preachers, it's a whole different thing. But listen, tonight we spend time talking about mental wellness, and we recognize that this is an issue that we have to address at every level. Remember that there is help available to you if you feel the need to talk. There is help available to you. The mental health department of the Ministry of Health is located in Kwame Street between Camp Street and Thomas Street. So if you know you need to talk to somebody in person, feel free to visit the mental health department. Feel free to reach out to one of our psychologists who are on the panel. You can find them. Just go on any social media and you can find them. Because they're there. And the reason they're utilizing that space is because they've made themselves available to you at every level. And so make sure you're reaching out to them. The National Suicide Hotlines, are 623-4444, 623-4444, or 603-3666, 603-3666, or 600-7896, 600-7896, or 223-0001, 223-0001, 223-0009, 223-0009, or 223-0818, 223-0818. If you are dealing with a mental health issue, these are the numbers you can call. Somebody's going to be there to talk with you. Somebody's going to be there to encourage you. Somebody's going to be there to hold your hands up. We recognize that mental health and all these issues are real. These are not things that you're just thinking about in your head. These are real issues. And so on this platform, Facing the Heart Truth, that is what we intend to do. We intend to deal with the real issues. I had the privilege tonight of listening to Cara, whom I've known since she was like since her mother told us all her secrets on another platform. Um, so I had the privilege of working with Cara, and Mr. Campbell, you have been a blessing to us, just as Cara has been over the years that I've known her, and it's been a few years. Well, I want to thank you both for being here with us tonight. It is a privilege when we get to share and use this platform to encourage and uplift the people around us. And so thank you so much for making yourself available, taking 2 hours out of your precious Wednesday evening to sit down and talk to the people of the nation and around the world. We did tonight, and as usual, we had people from Guyana, Canada, the US, um, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados. They have all been locked into the conversation tonight. So you weren't just speaking to Guyanese home, you were also speaking to people in the diaspora. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I know that people have been blessed. And so we look forward to engaging you next time on Facing the Heart Truth. I am Reverend Dr. Neilford Chase, and I served as your host. This has been informative for me, just as I'm sure it has been a blessing for you. God bless you, and I hope to see you next time when we reach again, which is next Wednesday, right here on Facing the Heart Truth. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.